Welcome to the AgManager Radio, brought to you by the Kansas State University Agricultural Economics Department. Our team of researchers and extension specialists are here to bring you commentary on the latest issues in agriculture.
Welcome once again to AgManager Radio. Today we have our own Dan O'Brien with us. Dan is with the Department of Ag Economics, as most of you know, here at Kansas State University, and he is our grain market outlook specialist. And I'm so excited to have Dan here today to talk about where the world is going with our grains, given all the uncertainties that are around us. So Dan, welcome to AgManager Radio.
Thank you very much, Vincent.
So let's start with the big things. And I'm going to shoot at you right away and say, where do you see us going with grains, given all the outlook on how farm incomes are going to be under pressure 24 and how 25 is going to look like?
Well, I think that I am amazed in a way to see how thin the margin is between plenty and scarcity in the markets. We say, well, for instance, with the size of the corn crop that we have and the anticipated for this fall, and again, the October report outcome that just came in had even higher record yields, 183.6, I think, and the previous record was 177.3, which, by the way, as ag economists, I inherently distrust any forecast that's way outside the range of anything we've ever seen, but yet here we are. So I really do want to see how this works itself out over the next few months. But anyway, anticipation of large crops, no shortfall, ending stocks for corn at 2 billion bushels. If by chance some combination of factors took that down to 1.5 or 1.6, we'd have a dramatically different view of the market right now. But we have enough, and the narrative belief, and it's more than just a belief, but I think it's more the issue of the reality in hand. We don't see any scarcity or any problems with the supply of corn. And corn's a big crop. Of course, we have domestic feed uses, ethanol uses, we export some, all of that. As we talk here, the December corn futures trading basically around $4 has been dropping the last few days. The projected price $4.10 by our KSU budgets, cost production budgets. Break evens at regular yields are more like 450, 460 plus. So we're already in a situation where, from a agribusiness management sense, we're not covering full economic costs. Because of that, we'll make decisions next year on next year's crops based on whatever we think will give us, which enterprise will give us the best opportunity to maybe at least break even. And in the short run, we can just cover direct costs, but we're not covering all of either land or machinery or even some family living, and that just causes change, So that, and soybeans, a very similar situation. So that a little bit lower yields in the U.S. coming out of this this October report, but the prices of $10.80 projected by the USDA. November soybeans, as we speak, trading below. Well, I say 10.80. That's a season average price, and we're closer to $9.90 on the November futures. So it seems like, if there are no surprises in this upcoming November report, and then the skips to January when the NASC actually gets in the field, that we're looking at, especially in November, harvest lows. And the only good thing about harvest lows is that, well, they're lows, and then we can figure out where things go from there. The wheat market has been I guess
switch to wheat. Just before you switch to wheat, Given that where the prices are on soybeans right now, where is our break-even price?
It generally we come closer because of the cost structure for soybeans. Get not as much fertilizer, seed costs a little bit different. We are closer to $9 to $10. So
Okay.
we're actually in a little better shape for covering full economic
Variable cost.
costs for soybeans than we are for corn. Uh, so at this point, that probably gives us preliminary signal that next spring, U.S. farmers be planting probably right now be leaning more towards soybeans than for corn. In major swaths of the Corn Belt and good parts of Kansas. Also, soybeans aren't as strong out in the more western droughty areas, but they are there. So
Mhm.
anyway, a little bit of favoring for soybeans at this point. And
Okay.
then domestically for wheat, we just struggled for few years, in essence, to be competitive in terms of world export markets. The and that when you well, you look at the wheat market trading at about 580 590 as we speak here, and the projected price for wheat for by the USDA for this market year, and that year runs from June to May, $5.70. And in terms of covering costs, we wheat is a crop that's great, stable crop, but unless you get 70, 80 bushels an acre, if you don't, we struggle having enough units to spread all those fixed costs out over to keep the cost production down. We have 6 to 650 break evens on our full economic cost budgets out to the west, and a little better in the central part. Out to the west, often they'll have fallow periods in there,
Mhm.
and it's a
Mhm.
great thing moisture wise. It's a tough thing economics wise to have 1/4, 1/3 of your land setting fallow. But that's so we've been that's just contributed to this trend of that we have in Kansas of sideways to lower wheat acres being seeded. So
Right.
that's we have some other crops we watch. Of course, grain sorghum, very dependent on Chinese imports. They buy a beverage over there, and it's very inelastic demand from a very narrow source that tends to be geopolitically influenced. So, grain sorghum is has moved in that direction. And when you ask me what's going on in the grain markets, well, it's maybe not so much what's happening, but what could happen. I just think with international factors that we have in what the Black Sea region, Ukraine, Russia, impacting both the feed grain and the wheat markets, and increasingly even soybeans. Uh, so you've got those things issues going on, and they have, along with the geopolitical challenges, they have a drought going on over there. It's cut back their production, so that's an issue. And the had some production problems in Europe. That's held them back some. The conflict in the between Israel and neighboring countries, neighboring groups, threatens the energy markets, and Iran with their activity with the Houthis in the Red Sea area, basically dealing with shipping lanes. That upset. That's been a challenge in the world markets to try to deduce how we'll work our way through that. And there and other there's always a threat of things happening in Asia. The China, Taiwan, and thankfully, from I guess as economists, we're not supposed to say thankfully or take a position, but there's not a major military conflict over there at this point. If there were, then then you've got Japan right there and all these Asian markets that are affected. China being a major buyer on the world stage for every grain, and um, so if we have issues like that we are not really quantifying in terms of price bids. I think we when I look at the grain markets in a broader perspective, I think that if there's one hard tested economic perspective out there, it's that, oh well, we'll get by. I don't know if we qualify that as an economic perspective, but it's a perspective of the markets. We're not we're not inclined at this point to be very panicky about anything until it actually happens. But gracious, these risks are out there, and I really have concerns long term in the world wheat market. We've been seeing world wheat stocks to use. By the time you take out China, which is hard to quantify, world minus China stocks, we're about 9 years ago at 25% of world use. Now they've been on a steady downward trend. Now we're down to about 18, and we're within close distance of the about 17 or so that happened in 2007, 2008 when the markets exploded. So again, I hope that the markets are not in a, I guess, time-tested statement that we don't have a false sense of security on in terms of the adequacy of supplies, especially for wheat in these markets. And at this time, I just don't think we're valuing quantifying or trading in to recognize how risky these situations are.
All right. No, and you are living up to the idea of the economist always carrying this doom that is coming. But that's okay. Let us turn our attention a little bit to the business of what we can see. It's already happening now, or what we can see we can control. So we are not going to stop a lot of these challenges that you talk about because they are political, and probably we might even have the non-political agencies like the advocates for climate change and carbon production and all that might present greater levels of uncertainties in the marketplace for us. Probably more than the political issues that you are raising. So for me, I would love you to talk a little bit about, as producers who are looking at a market to determine how much of my resources I put into corn, wheat, or sorghum or soybeans. And Western Kansas, as you said, we are not doing a lot of soybeans, but AgManager is now a global, service. So we can talk about these global products as well. But as people are thinking about how do we distribute our resources to enhance our own performance as a farm business, what should they be looking at? What should be the critical 1, 2, or 3 issues as they plan 25 and start looking at resource allocation?
I think the decision of whether to continue 100% invested in generalized commodities that are undifferentiated in the markets is a choice versus looking at, or at least experimenting with, some specialized crops. And that doesn't mean that, gosh, suddenly we're putting a pivot of tomatoes out there, which we could, but we'd have a hard time with the labor. But I think that that all the markets I've talked about so far, I've implicitly talked about that the general commodity figures. A bushel of corn here is generally a bushel of corn over there, or wheat,
right,
whatever. So
right,
that is something to consider. And with that, and I think we've seen the issue, say, with industrial hemp here of late, industrial hemp or CBD type products. We can look at those issues. They have promise. The distribution system is such a question to be sure if we step into those areas that we actually have a way to gather, to just have a market to sell into.
Yeah, the supply chains are not as developed yet as a commodity markets we are familiar with.
We can there are some things that can be considered. We can grow, instead of generalized corn, we can get involved in seed corn, popcorn, high lysine corn. There are products with that now growth of ethanol plants around that, they're uh, ethanol bioenergy plants, crushers. We're talking about camelina, an industrialized oilseed crop
Mhm.
that could be sold to plant in it's near Goodland, Kansas.
Right.
Schooler had taken that over.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
used to be a sunflower crush plant. So
Yeah.
that's there. And there's a new soybean crush plant in Cherryvale to go along with the one um, in south of Topeka. I can't remember the name. Emporia. There you go.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so we have some of those options that are out there. I think that you're seeing one thing we have seen in an effort to diversify a little bit has been that at the very farm level, you see a lot more farm trucks out there. You see generally a fair amount of grain storage being put up. So they're diversifying in terms of the timing of sales, because now they can store the distance and the possibilities for alternative bids. Uh, that so we I think that's quite a prevalent move in terms of now if a farmer doesn't own one or two semis then or have access to them, that's probably a question they would ask themselves about. And with the ethanol plants, with these processors that are around, the they don't have lots and lots of storage
Mhm.
built. They have quite a bit, but not for a full year. So
Right.
you we literally, when we look at enterprises of what to do, we can have a storage function, as we economists would say, a storage enterprise, and contract with these processors for March delivery, May delivery, something like that to basically
Basically, to
meet
manage the
their
price.
needs.
Yeah.
So,
Manage the manage the price option. Um,
yeah,
so you talked about a number of potential alternatives, and what I've seen is we get excited about these, new enterprises that we could enter, seed corn or sweet corn or popcorn. Uh, but there's a reason why we grow feed corn or grain sorghum because we have volume, we have specialization, we have markets, we have knowledge. So if we're going to think about diversification, and given the fact that, and there are different levels of farmers. I mean, we have for the large scale operation, the focus is on, regardless of what the market is throwing at us, we have to minimize our cost, right? So
for sure.
we bring every cost that we can bring in and control that. We control our debt. We ensure that we are positioning our purchases in such a way that we're minimizing our cost. And then, like you said, we are also minimizing the price risk that is confronting us by either building storage so that we can sell over time. Um, but if we are thinking about, the small farm that is not big enough to have this volume advantage of cost minimization, and therefore is under pressure to manage that cost because a combine is a combine. I mean, you're going to pay the same price. Fuel prices
Uh,
are fuel prices as they are.
and those combines, uh, the, are they $1 million? Are they 800,000?
We
So
Yeah.
so when you talk about moderate size farms, the these are one common treadmill approach is to get bigger, to have more bushels, more acres, to uh,
Reduce your average
to
cost.
take those fixed costs and spread them out as far as you can. I We may be running into labor constraints on that,
Yeah.
but so that is certainly one track. That's not necessarily as unless someone's a really good mechanic. That's been the old standard. Unless they're a really good mechanic, or they can custom purchase harvesting or something, then it's more difficult for moderate size farms to tie into that.
And those are it's that middle part that I wanted us to focus on because the large operator can already has the scale to bring that cost down, gain the economies of scale. The small operator can do some of the things that you are talking about. Let's look at specialty crops, because the challenge there is the market is thin, and therefore you are not going to get somebody coming to take 2,000 acres of production from you, because they also have a smaller market that they are dealing with. So the chain tends to be smaller, niche-like, right? At least at the moment. And so the middle guys who are not big enough to be large and not small enough to be small, those are the ones who cannot take the full advantage of economies of scale and still take full advantage of niche marketing, right? And often when we talk about the challenges in farm country, we either talking about the big guys and how, this is how we analyze them and we push them in the trade and all that stuff. Or we talk about the small guys. Let's produce enough to feed a couple of restaurants in Kansas City, for example, right?
Sure.
So where do we put these guys in the middle who are not big enough to be big and small enough to be small?
If Glenn Tonzer, our colleague, was here, I think the large farms with their scale have largely, at least in most of Kansas that I've seen, they've vacated livestock enterprises, and unless they're tied in with large contract production, but the smaller specialty enterprises, perhaps even tying in more closely with local meat processing facilities. Those are possibilities. So that's one thing to consider. I think, Vincent, have you ever, in talking with people, I think one thing that moderate-sized farmers, particularly young farmers, have, moderate, medium-aged to younger, they have expertise and they have labor, and I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that they can partner with some of these larger operations and say, I'll trade my labor for access to your machinery line. There are partnerships like that, and again, and those moderate-sized farmers, they know how to run, they know how to fix machinery, and they know how to keep it going. So I'd wonder, as one opportunity to consider partnering with people like that. And I think most farms, of course, it so much depends on the attitude of the large farm, but I would not be averse to if I were a large farm, I wouldn't be averse to someone, hey, you have skills and we can help each other.
Yeah, it becomes the economics, and maybe that's where we are trying to get our constituents to think about that. In the final analysis, strategic alliances might become a more feasible approach for us to think about how do we take full advantage of the uncertainties in the marketplace, right? So before we start thinking about jumping into a new market where we don't completely understand its own uncertainties, we know what we have. We know that I'm producing corn. If I'm in Western Kansas, I have uncertainties about water and prices. If I'm in wheat, I have these uncertainties. So how do I minimize those? And I think strategic alliances become a very useful way for us to think about it, especially like you just talked about, the medium-sized farm that has slack in time, but is constrained on resources, can then form this alliance. And the way we look at strategic alliances, Dan, is that they are collaborations and not acquisitions, right? So you are still maintaining your operations. You are an independent operation, but you have a collaborative relationship with somebody who has an extra capacity on their equipment, for example.
Yeah.
So you are trading, like you said, time for equipment, right? I'm going to come and I'll run all our operations because the combine you have, the capacity is that it should work, let's say 10,000 acres. but you have a 5,000 acres capacity. I have a 2,000 acre capacity. Together, we are running it at 70%. If you are running it alone, you are running it at 50%, right? What can I do to reduce your overall capital cost?
And it's time and managerial, managerial and operational expertise.
Yes.
That I think when large operations look to hire people, I I think in a lot of cases it'll be difficult for them to find someone as skilled as smaller to moderate sized farms. Of course, it's an opportunity, especially for younger farms in the growth phase. That on the other side of this, then when someone if a piece of land comes open to buy or to rent, that hopefully there'd be some agreement, some working issue between that large farmer and the collaborating smaller one as to hey, what, who goes after that? How do we deal with that?
And sincerely, I mean, I know that we focus a lot on these capital assets, but given the direction we are going and what you are talking about on the outlook side, given the fact that labor has become a big issue for us, and yes, everybody looks at technology to be able to solve it, but those are a little way down the line. We are not there yet. We will get there, but I mean, I'm very confident we will get there, but we are not there yet. So if we think in those terms, then the potential advantages of these collaborations become critical. So when land becomes available, we are no longer looking at it from just, am I grabbing this? You are looking at it within the capacity of the resources you have and how that extra, ground improves the economics, given that we don't control what is happening on the price side, but we control everything on the cost side, right? So we become so acutely focused, laser focused on the cost component. And so if we have equipment that can do 10,000, but we are currently at 7,000 capacity, then there is room for us to think about adding to that to bring our average cost down. If we have equipment to do 10,000 and we are at 9,000 and 5,000 becomes available, and the next equipment that we can get is not going to make that economics feasible and we don't have the equipment to deal with it, then it's okay for us to say we let it pass.
We stand on the shoulders of people in the past that we're talking about. We're talking about something that my father up in Nebraska, moderate sized farm, when he started out, he bought a combine along with a friend of his, and that got them by. Now eventually they had their own. Those individual operations both grew, and out of necessity it became separate, but it helped up front. And of course, at that time, a combine is probably $100,000 or $80,000, but this was back in the 60s. So that we've had a lot of inflation since that time. But point being that capital assets are just very, very difficult to get hold of. So I think the thread I hear you talking about is cost control, having access to the assets you need to carry out these enterprises. The reality of at least at times that we're seeing, such as we're seeing right now, where we're at risk of relatively low prices, and over the years, is that 20-30% of the time probably, but you have to survive those 20-30% of the time. Having access to credit is a huge issue, and I don't know if you've dealt with that or want to talk about it, but really a big challenge.
We had Brady Brewer on AgManager Radio a few weeks ago, and he talked about the fact that when the markets are good and farmers are flush with cash, the bankers suffer because we don't use credit as much as we need it. So the current stress that we are going into has a certain advantage for bankers and the credit markets, especially with where interest rates are, even though we expect that the Feds are going to bring it down as we go into the next year. But the other thing is this. I mean, regardless of the access, I think it's extremely critical that we continue to pencil things out, right? So I don't know what your outlook is, and maybe you can talk about it a little bit. So if we just, incorporate all the things that are going on in the market and the uncertainties and everything, we have corn at about corn at about, we put it at $4. No.
Oh, yeah, cash prices right now, $4 or below. But this
Right.
is in the midst of harvest. So yeah,
Right.
I understand that.
So if we have the best, if we peg it at about, historical average and say going forward, if we throw all these uncertainties on that market, where are we going to be and where will our cost be? So in terms of our break-even price, what does it look like, right? And then how long will that be? So then we develop a discipline that says, if this works in the worst of times, why shouldn't it work in the best of times? That becomes the business strategy, because often what happens, as you know, is when times get tough, we hunker down. And then when things get better, we throw all caution to the wind, right? So we go through these booms and busts in terms of the pressures on the farm and the farm business and the farm family. But if we can develop the discipline of saying, this strategy works because I'm managing at this level of efficiency, I'm managing all my costs efficiently, then what happens is if I continue with that strategy and prices get stronger, I'm only banking a lot more money, right? Instead of increasing my cost to meet my revenues, and we say that, people's expenditures increase to meet their incomes, right? So if we manage our cost as efficiently as possible as a disciplined process of running the business of farming, then we've managed risk. It doesn't then matter what is going on on the market side, which we can't control. Does that make sense from where you are sitting, Dan?
Yeah, yes, I think the idea of what our colleagues at University of Illinois, Scott Irwin, Phil Garcia, now retired, others coined the phrase. I don't know if they coined the phrase, but they brought it to light in the markets of mean reversion. We have economic forces that respond to low prices, economic forces, i.e. our own decisions, but both at the production, user level, et cetera. We respond to low prices by tending to take actions that tend to drive prices higher. We respond to high prices, great profits by over-investing, over-planting, whatever, and we tend to drive prices down. I don't think it's an average as much as it is the also moving target of break even. What the break even thing is. I don't think it's a mean break even process over time. And I don't think in our econ classes they said, well, the best profits, they didn't say directly that the best
Strategy.
solution for low prices is low prices, best solution for high prices. But yet, it from a, I guess, welfare economics point of view, that's kind of what happens. We tend to respond to high and low prices. So what do I think? Where do I think things will be in the long run? I think we'll gravitate up and down around what break-even costs are, whatever that path is, and inflation is affecting that. So
Yeah.
prices might go up, but our profitability will move around that. I think that that I would that drives us to be mindful of cost efficiency. There'll be times in high profit times when the narrative of a narrative of irrational exuberance is out there. And how do you respond? And if you say, okay, I'm thinking in the long run, and a piece of land comes open that you could rent and cash rent, the the landowner or their heirs, they see what the highest numbers are. They want that, and so you'll be. I think there'll be times when people that manage like you're talking about will be hard pressed to walk away from the latest opportunity to obtain an asset, particularly farmland, but it could be other things too. So I think that there's the mental to say what you're talking about, to manage as you're talking about, to have financial goals, minimize costs, go all the way through. That's it, it has a psychological component to it. What's your long-term plan on this, and you have to steel yourself to know that it's not all bad when it's bad. It's not all good when it's good. One last comment. Is about 2014, 2015, after the drought, the 2012, it came in early, great prices, 2013 for grains, and 14, then by 14, 15, 16, 17, then the market had responded. Prices were a lot lower. We were wondering if we were ever going to survive, but we were still dealing with the run up in land costs and cash rents that had occurred in 12, 13, and so I was at this. It was a meeting in Oakley, Kansas, and had a whole room of farmers, and a wizened farmer. He's obviously in the consolidation or even decline part. He's probably in the consolidation part. He asked me, and the whole room said it. The whole room took this in, that given what's happened from those high, from that, what happened to the price of all these assets, machinery, land, labor, everything, and given the problems it's causing us right now, 2 or 3 years after that, was it really a good thing that we had that? So that person had perspective and seen this up and down for years, and assets. So in light of that, what managerial perspectives or framework do we bring to people to help them deal with both the downward side and the upward side, and all this volatility over time, and still survive?
Well, and that's the beauty of thinking like an economist, which is what our role is. I always say that the price is given by the market. We happen to be operating in a market economy. The price will always be given by the market. We are not big enough to influence it. We are not small enough to make any difference if anything happens, right? But your cost is contracted, right? So you're going to sign a contract for a land rent or a shock, whatever, it's contracted. And so what happens then is you are at the mercy of the market in telling what your price is, but then you've committed yourself to 5 years or 10 years. If you bought an equipment and you are paying a mortgage on it, it's contracted, it's fixed. So it doesn't matter what is happening here. And that is why, for us to manage with the discipline of ensuring profitability of the farm business, we control the cost because we have control over that. And then we don't worry about what is going on here, because as long as this is good, and we've got it at the right place, wherever we are, those who are managing well are going to be making money.
We'll be hard pressed to not go with the herd of buying a particular color of machinery or scale of machinery, or and if the competitive cost of the machinery side or of land, etc., is such, then it may be the best economic decision to not contract for something if you're just locking in a loss. And
Right.
and can you wait the 1 or 2 years for the market to actually show its true colors and say, gosh, that was way too high, we're paying for back there. But
if you
but
have
man,
managed well,
that's the long game. It's a hard one to play in the year by
so
year deal.
let's bring Delta T, and you're an outlook person, so you tend to look forward and all that. And you know me, I am just profit driven. And
Well,
so,
that's why we're both in the same faculty, so we can help one another. So,
but if you bring your delta T, your planning horizon closer to the present, right? Then you know for sure what, and you've given us prices for 24 and what 25 might look like. So we have a lot more confidence over what 25 price might look like than we have over what,
yeah.
26, 27, 30 would look like, right? But when we go out and buy that combine, the price is today's price, and it's factored in for us to pay for it with production and revenues coming from the future. And that's why in our earlier conversation, when we started talking about alliances, optimizing the utilization rate on that of that equipment allows us to get economies of scale. So then we take the psychology out. Don't buy that shining equipment because it is nice. You buy it because it's going to contribute.
Yeah, it has to be a positive asset. Well,
That's right. It's going to contribute. And that's what we talked about as discipline. Our farmers who are doing that are thriving regardless of the market environment. The ones that we worry about are those that either don't know or get motivated by what you call the mentality of the herd. Unfortunately, and I know psychologists are making a ton of money talking about this mentality of the herd. I'm an economist, and I always say that the math that people are doing to make their decisions are always right, but the decisions could be wrong. So what we need to fix or help people is how to do that math, right? What are the variables and the calculations that should go into the math? Because if we get the math right, then our farm families are going to be successful and thrive regardless of what the market throws at them.
Case in point, Western Kansas, some fairly stable water table areas, other declining fairly stable water table areas. But to utilize that irrigation water, you almost have to have a center pivot irrigation system, and they're 6 figures plus, that much less the hole, which another 6 figures. The well and pump, gearhead, all that chaff. So yeah, pretty well-defined, really economic choice. You have a center pivot system over X number of years, costs this much.
Yep.
Irrigated crop production for however many inches you can plant on, and maybe that's, if it's declined, maybe it's 5, 6, 7 inches of water. When we had a history of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Anyway, something like that. So
Yeah.
you've got revenues versus cost, and the issue of income, that's, in most cases, that's borrowed money. It got interest on it, and it's a challenging decision. But anywhere in that western third of the state, and parts of central, also north central, south central, they're making those types of choices, and
Yep.
and so our job is not to tell them what to do, but I just like what you're saying. We're whatever we can do to help them quantify the economics, pros and cons of that decision. Maybe a partial budget framework, probably, that could be
Yep.
part of that.
Absolutely.
That's our responsibility, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, it's always fun to get together with you and talk about, the things that ensures that our farmers stay in business. Because if there's anything that we are passionate about, and it shows in this conversation we just had, and that K-State Ag Econ Department is committed to, is ensuring that our farmers here are successful and farm families are thriving, because whether we like it or not, agriculture is driving our communities. And in our conversation with Sarah Ryan the other day, we said agriculture is equal to national security.
Sure.
So, what we are talking about, ensuring that farmers are making the best decisions and have the tools to make those decisions, regardless of what the market environment is throwing at them. It's not just important for our farm families and our farmers, but it's critically important for the national security of this country. Dan, thank you very much for taking the time to come on AgManager Radio. I'm sure we'll do this again, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I appreciate the chance to speak with you.
You're very welcome.